Man, the New York Times is absolutely begging to be sued into nothingness. What would it be like to have the nation of Israel actually sue the New York Times because they have grounds to do this? Or maybe it's the Israeli Defense Force. Maybe it's some individual Israeli soldiers who could sue them. The New York Times made a decision to run one of the most clear cases of propaganda I've ever seen, and it's inexcusable. And what's so fascinating about it is it was so easy for the Israeli Defense Fund to come back and say, or Defense Forces to come back and say, let us give you the full story. But you know what I love about this? They waited a few days. They waited for a few days before they came along and absolutely cooked the New York Times. The New York Times is being set up for not being set up, they've set themselves up for a lawsuit. Now, I'm pretty sure the New York Times has protected their writers and their editors from being personally sued. Pretty sure they're that sophisticated. But you might be surprised how many small and medium-sized business owners, even people who are pretty sophisticated, think they've got protection because they've got the corporate veil, when in fact they don't. A friend of mine is very sophisticated. He owns 5 or 6 businesses that are loosely connected. They're either LLCs or corporations. He actually, because he heard me talking about Visible, went and did the research. He found out that, in fact, all of those businesses, multi-millions of dollars, are not corporate credit. They're linked to he and his wife's retirement accounts and homes. In other words, if he got sued, people could help themselves to everything my friend has worked for. There's an easy way to find out if you actually have corporate credit, if your corporation is actually providing the corporate veil. Go to Visible's website. It's govisible.com. That's with a Z, GoVisible. They'll tell you if you have actual corporate credit. If you don't, they'll help you get it in 7 easy steps. They'll introduce you to a lending platform so that once you have corporate credit, you can actually get your business funded properly. It's govisible.com. The New York Times ran a piece about famine in Gaza. And they chose to have a picture on the cover, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. It's a woman wearing a headscarf. After all, it is Gaza. She's holding a little baby in what looks like to be a homemade diaper or a cloth. You can see the little boy's backbone. You can see that bloated look that people get when they're starving. That bloated look, was explained to me later, was that's the stomach filling up with air. It's horrific. And the mother is cast, and the lighting is done in such a way that she appears to be almost like images you'd see of the Mother Mary. I don't think that could be a mistake. And there she is in sort of a robe that's meant to be, I think, meant to look a little purple. Is to bring about images that I think is meant to appeal to Christians. And they ran this article about how this little boy is starving as a result of what Israel is doing in Gaza. Now, I'm not here to say that the Israeli government is perfect. I'm not here to say that the Israeli government is solid and godly. I don't think it is. I think it's a fallen nation, like we're a fallen nation. But then the Israeli Defense Forces came along, and when you bring the image back up, Alex, you can see that the Israeli Defense Forces came along and said, yeah, actually, why didn't you show his brother? Because his brother's standing right next to the little boy. And his brother is well-nourished. The starving little boy has cystic fibrosis, which is known to create outcomes that appear to be famine. The New York Times came along and did a little edit. We've added an addendum to our story. This boy had a pre-existing condition. But the question is, why did you choose that photo? Why did you choose that image? The answer is the image itself. That's why they chose it, because the New York Times are propagandists. The nation of Israel should sue them for what they did in this case, this massive lie. And how much money could they take? Maybe enough to extinguish the New York Times. Am I hoping that it's extinguished? Yes, because it's a horrible propaganda organ. And we've got enough propaganda. There's been reports of starvation in Gaza for how long? My goodness, even CNN.
There's been reports since 2007 of starvation in Gaza, because what happened in 2007? Hamas took over Gaza. There were no reports of starvation prior to that when Israel was in control of Gaza. Now, the facts are right now, we have over 600 trucks, food trucks, and thousands of crates in northern Gaza that the United Nations is refusing to distribute inside Gaza.
Here's some facts. When Israel decided to start airdropping food and release supplies and medical supplies, they took drones. They filmed the planes dropping the goods. They filmed the parachutes with it dropping down. And then the Mockingbird media found people living in Gaza who said, we're not dogs. We shouldn't have to be chasing after these scraps being dropped from the master's planes. Why are we running around for food? Why did you vote Hamas in? Hamas, that is at the very least a terrorist group. It would be fair to describe them as homicidal. It would be fair to point out that all the aid that's come into Gaza, or so much of it, has been used for military purposes. Pipes meant to transport water turned into missiles. The New York Times is a propaganda organ, and I hope that the nation of Israel sues them into non-existence.